Amazing rescue. Man discovers the truth behind the puppy, leaving vet shocked and transformed. Jake stared at the scrap pile behind his auto shop, the remnants of another exhausting day weighing down his shoulders. It wasn't just the engines that were stalling. It felt like life was too. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a small puppy digging through the trash, its ribs visibly protruding against matted fur. The big, imploring eyes pierced through his beleaguered heart, begging for help that he could barely offer. Jake hesitated. His fridge was nearly bare. Food had become a luxury. But all the years of compassion didn't allow him to look away. With a shake of his head, he scooped the little creature into his arms, naming him Lucky. As weeks turned into a cozy routine filled with barks and wagging tails despite the shop's dwindling clients, the bond between Jake and Lucky flourished. Yet, his internal peace shattered one night when Lucky fell gravely ill. The soft whimpering echoed through the empty shop, igniting a panic that cut deep. The thought of losing the only spark in his dreary life sent his heart racing, throat tight with dread. He knew he needed to see Dr. Emily, the town's best vet, but how could he afford her fees? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. It took every ounce of courage to drive to the clinic. The contrast struck him hard, his worn jeans a patchwork of grease and sweat, while Dr. Emily's pristine coat shimmered with a confidence he'd seldom felt. A mix of shame and envy clawed at him as he sat in the waiting room, his fingers tapping anxiously against the frayed seat. What right did he have to expect compassion from someone of her stature? As she examined Lucky, her professionalism was laced with warmth, yet Jake's internal struggle persisted, acute and relentless. Then came the moment of revelation, a chance encounter with a passerby who whispered about the businessman's involvement in a local stray animal ring. It rattled through him like an electric shock. A dark web of corruption anchoring around Lucky's origins linked to the very people who flaunted their wealth as status. Anguish festered as guilt gripped him for even considering Lucky a mere privilege rather than a responsibility. His fears morphed into resolve. Taking a stand now meant more than just saving his dog. But would Dr. Emily stand with him, risking her career to confront this looming threat? The tension spiraled, muscles taut as his mind spun with questions he feared facing. Would his humble voice even be heard? On the precipice between despair and defiance, Jake realized the fight ahead could alter everything. With determination tightening around his heart, an irresistible promise of justice sparked within him. Would this journey lead to redemption or further isolation? As the path ahead grew murky, Jake prepared to uncover the truth. A storm gathering just on the horizon. The weight of uncertainty hung heavily in the air as Jake drove home, Lucky nestled in a makeshift bed on the passenger seat. The rhythmic bump of the tires against the pavement mirrored the turbulent thoughts racing through his mind. He had always been the quiet observer, watching life unfold around him. But now he was standing at the edge of a precipice, ready to leap into the fray. Back at the shop, the comforting hum of the neon lights flickered, casting flickering shadows that danced eerily against the walls. Day by day, he had lost parts of himself to the relentless grind of mechanics and the slow creep of despair. Now, with Lucky's fate hanging precariously as the catalyst, a surge of adrenaline coursed through him, igniting a fresh sense of purpose. As he opened the fragmented door of the auto shop, the familiar smell of oil and dust engulfed him. He had once relished this sanctuary, a space where he felt competent. But now, it felt less like home, and more like a prison. Noting a stack of unpaid bills on the cluttered desk, the dread bubbled back to the surface, reminding him of the challenges he faced. Still, the whispers of corruption and Lucky's trusting gaze urged him to focus. Jake sank into a worn-out chair, momentarily resting his head in his hands, wrestling with a growing decision. It could be easy to retreat back to his solitary existence, avoiding confrontation altogether. But would he be able to live with himself, knowing he abandoned Lucky? The thought of portraying torment rather than action sent waves of conviction surging through him. "I need to confront him," he murmured aloud, the words empowering him with resolve. With newfound clarity, Jake created a plan. First, he would gather information about the businessman, piecing together the puzzle of the stray animal ring that encompassed the town. Skillfully navigating through dark alleyways won't just be about saving Lucky. It would be about dismantling a network of cruelty that snaked through their lives. He was no longer the man who sat back, an unwilling part of the background. He would be a fighter, an advocate for the voiceless. The next day, his mind spun with questions as he ventured to the town library. The dim light filtered through dusty windows, illuminating shelves filled with the echoes of forgotten stories. Jake rifled through newspaper clippings, articles detailing local businesses, and any mention of the notorious man rumored to be the orchestrator behind the ruthless operation. Each lead he unearthed magnified the stakes, his breaths growing shallow with each revelation. Exposure to the truth felt like being granted a pass to a realm he never thought possible. He was stepping into an arena where passion could ignite change, a world beyond the confines of his shop where he mattered, where his voice could carry weight. Weeks faded into days, his tireless research transforming him. Each piece of evidence he discovered turned the tide of urgency within him, igniting a fire he hadn't known existed. The vulnerability of seeking help gave way to unyielding determination, morphing self-doubt into empowerment. Yet, the apprehension remained, gnawing at him. What if he reached the point of no return? What would happen when he finally crossed paths with the businessman? Would he be ready for the confrontation, the fallout that could ensue? As dusk settled over the town, the sky splashed with hues of orange and purple, Jake stood outside the auto shop, the cool air filling his lungs. Everything he had learned led to this moment. The resolve burgeoning within was palpable. Each heartbeat resonated like a call to arms within him. The time had come to face not just the shadows of his past, but the very darkness that plagued his community, and he felt the pull of destiny drawing him closer. Would he stumble upon his path, or could he embrace the fear and emerge on the other side stronger? The impending confrontation loomed on the horizon, a tempest building, testing the fragile threads of his courage. The first rays of dawn crept over the horizon as Jake paced within the confines of the auto shop, the dim glow of neon lights now overshadowed by the natural light calling him outside. The air was thick with anticipation, and the weight of his plan settled heavily on his shoulders. Today was the day. He couldn't delay any longer. Lucky's life depended on the steps he was about to take. With each step he took around the cluttered space filled with grease-stained tools and remnants of old projects, a flurry of thoughts crisscrossed his mind. He meticulously rehearsed every detail of the conversation with the businessman, a cold man known more for his power than his compassion. Jake understood that information would be his weapon, but entering the lion's den without adequate preparation felt reckless. His gut twisted at the thought of confrontation. What if he succeeded? Or worse, what if he failed? The mere idea of standing across from someone who thrived on cruelty sent shockwaves down his spine. Deep breaths grounded him, a desperate attempt to anchor himself to the resolve he had fought so hard to cultivate. Jake pulled out a faded notepad from his back pocket, the pages crammed with notes, insights, and evidence he had painstakingly gathered. Each piece of information was a reminder of why he could not back down. He had long been trapped in a cycle of self-doubt, but now he could feel something awakening within him, a forceful resurgence of honesty and integrity. He pictured Lucky's hopeful face, an innocent soul that deserved so much more. The plan formed within his mind like a map. He would first establish a connection with the businessman's known associates, the people who flanked him like vultures. With a clear target in sight, Jake slipped on his well-worn sneakers and headed toward the bustling part of town. The street, once a blur of familiarity, now felt foreign as he mentally prepared himself for the impending encounter. Arriving at a cafe tucked between a convenience store and a dilapidated building, Jake's heart raced at the sight of the businessman's associates seated at a patio table, their conversation punctuated with laughter that felt somehow sinister. Jake took a moment to observe them, masking his anxiety behind a facade of calm. They looked comfortable in their skin, unbothered by the pain their actions inflicted. But Jake was here to disrupt that comfort. He approached, forcing a casual demeanor, as if he belonged in their space. "Mind if I join?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. The group paused, eyes shifting toward him, scanning him like strangers would scrutinize an interloper. "Who are you?" one of them asked, their tone dripping with condescension. Jake sensed their dismissiveness but pushed ahead. "I heard about some intriguing ventures. I thought I might learn something." Their expressions tightened, and the light-hearted air turned anxious. They exchanged glances, and Jake could feel the tension thickening. Perhaps this was naive, but he felt a surge of hope rise within him. The potential for camaraderie around shared interests brought a sense of purpose that ignited his courage. He engaged them in conversation, asking pointed questions, testing the waters. Each answer was like pulling a thread from an intricate tapestry, slowly unwinding the fabric they had created. It wasn't long before they began to reveal cracks in their facade, slipping into traps laid out by their own arrogance. As the truth spilled forth, he scribbled notes in the margins of his mind, piecing together the puzzle that tethered their lives to Lucky and the other stray animals. But then, amidst the casual banter, one of them leaned closer, a steely gaze piercing through Jake's facade. "You seem a bit too curious for someone like you. What do you want?" The blood rushed to Jake's head. In that moment, everything felt at risk. His heart raced as time slowed around him. Would he crumble under scrutiny, or would his hidden strength materialize? His mind raced for an answer that would maintain his cover while bolstering his resolve. As he grappled with the weight of the moment, a singular thought crystallized in his mind. He was not just a participant in their game. He intended to rewrite the rules. He clenched the notepad in his hand, knowing that the encounter had shifted, and the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. The moment demanded a reply that could either define or deflate his newfound purpose. Jake inhaled deeply and prepared to respond, even as panic surged through him. What he didn't know was just how devastatingly life-altering this moment would prove to be. Jake's heart thundered in his chest as the words lingered in the air, heavy with potential. He locked eyes with the man who had called him out, searching for any sign of weakness. There was none. The steely gaze radiated hostility, aiming to strip away his confidence layer by layer. In that instant, Jake felt the fusion of fear and resolve ignite within him. "I'm just trying to learn how the world works," Jake replied, infusing his voice with a casual confidence he didn't quite feel. He could sense the group weighing his response, their skepticism bubbling beneath the surface. It was a gamble, one that could unravel everything or solidify his place among them. Even as they scrutinized him, Jake's mind was racing, grasping for strategies that would further his agenda. "Yeah, right," one of them scoffed. "Learning from experts like us? You must think you're pretty special." The mocking laughter that followed stung like a slap, but Jake remained unyielding, mentally fortifying himself against their derision. They were powerful, but their arrogance was their Achilles heel. "I want to see the world from your perspective," he countered, projecting a facade of curiosity. While he spoke, he observed their body language, studying the subtle shifts, the way they leaned back in their chairs or the way their eyes flicked toward each other, seeking validation. Each interaction provided clues that could help him piece together their network, but he needed to stay centered. The awkward tension thawed slightly, and one of them smirked, gesturing for Jake to take a seat. Sensing a potential breakthrough, he joined them, battling the panic boiling in his gut. He needed to become a part of this conversation, but as the banter progressed, he felt like an imposter stepping into a world he barely understood. Jake engaged in the conversation, determined not to show weakness. He peppered questions about their interests and business ventures, allowing them to turn the attention away from him. There was a rush of adrenaline as secrets began to seep out, their bravado blinding them to his true purpose. With every revelation, the foundation of his fear crumbled further, replaced by burgeoning confidence. Yet, despite the fleeting victories, a gnawing sense of urgency consumed him. Behind each laugh and boast lay the reality of Lucky's situation, and it fueled Jake's drive. He could feel the weight of his mission push down on him, amplifying the necessity of his actions. But as the sun began its descent, casting a dim glow over the cafe, His instincts screamed at him to tread carefully. The need for information clashed with the potential for danger, a storm brewing on the horizon. With their trust hanging by a thread, Jake focused on being as observant as possible, ready to adapt his strategy. "Tell me," one of the braver associates challenged, leaning in closer. "What's really in it for you? You think you can just move in on our turf unnoticed?" The challenge stung, and Jake felt the eyes of the group boring into him. Each second stretched, and he understood that this moment could pivot the course of everything. Would he back down, retreating into fear, or would he confront the truth? He blinked against the onslaught of doubt and made a decision that sent a jolt of clarity through him. "I'm looking for a way to help." His voice was steadier now, revealing a sliver of vulnerability that felt dangerous, but necessary. "Help for a dog I found in trouble." The shift was instantaneous, with the group recoiling from personal topics turned businesslike. It was a gamble to invoke compassion within hardened hearts, but it was now or never. Jake could sense the ripples of discomfort, but his honesty stirred a flicker of curiosity among them. As the seconds ambled on, hidden motivations began to surface among his adversaries. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a pivotal moment where Jake could leverage everything he had learned, his instincts swelling as a plan began to form. Unbeknownst to him, what lay ahead would challenge him to confront not just the businessmen, but his own limits. The tightrope he walked beckoned risk, revealing the precarious balance between helping Lucky and potentially exposing himself to unimaginable danger. And as he continued to speak, outlining his intentions, a thought niggled at the back of his mind. How far was he willing to go to save the innocent? Each syllable he uttered resonated within him, affirming the urgency of his quest and foreshadowing a decision that would alter everything he thought he knew about himself. The murmurs in the cafe faded beneath Jake's racing thoughts as he prepared for the group's next move. Their curiosity had been piqued, and he needed to harness that momentum into something actionable. They were no longer just spectators. They were intrigued. This was a pivotal juncture, one where he could pivot from mere observation into alliance, or at least a semblance of it. He leaned in closer, using the proximity to establish a connection. "What if your expertise could save something that's often overlooked, a stray dog? I know you all have the resources, the knowledge. Together, we could make a difference." Jake's words danced through the air, each syllable weighted with the hope of igniting something within them. The scorn that had colored their faces began to thaw, though he could still feel an underlying skepticism. Jake recognized he was standing on thin ice, and every step forward had the potential to break through the surface. The group exchanged glances, their expressions shifting, calculating the worth of his offer. "Why do you care so much?" asked the man who had initially challenged him, his tone less aggressive than before. "You're just some kid. What's it to you?" Jake felt the challenge push against his motivations. How much could he reveal without exposing his vulnerability? "Because I've been that kid," he replied, a weight settling onto his shoulders as he dug into his past. "I know what it's like to be alone in the world. I found Lucky on the street, abandoned and hurt. And if we can save him, maybe we can save something in ourselves too." His words hung in the air, a subtle invitation for introspection. Did they feel the same pang of empathy he did? Did their cold exteriors mask a longing for purpose, a desire to reclaim innocence lost? There was a flicker, perhaps from one of the associates, a slight nod, or was it just a figment of his hope? Either way, he seized the moment. Jake crafted a vision for them. Imagine a campaign, social media buzz, local news features, even collaboration with the vet community. "It's a PR opportunity for you," he pressed, eyes intent. "Show everyone that your business cares. You can be part of something bigger, and it could mean more than chasing profits." He could feel the energy in the room shift. Curiosity was melting the skepticism. Perhaps it was the audacity of his proposal, or the raw honesty in his delivery, but he sensed a door ever so slightly creaking open. "How do you propose we do that?" Another voice broke through, lower but curious, clearly not yet sold but on the verge. Jake smiled inwardly, pivoting into the role of leader he had rehearsed in his mind. "First, we organize a gathering at a local park. Invite your friends, your customers, bring in the community. Everyone loves a story about rescue. He paused, allowing them to absorb the idea. And we make it about more than just Lucky. We raise awareness of strays, advocate for better care and shelters. It's all interconnected. He was pitching not just an event, but a reformation of their public persona. As he spoke, Jake felt the thrill of articulating something beyond ambition. This was a shared mission forming in the space between them, defining him in ways he had not anticipated. Yet beneath the surface of hopeful exchange, anxiety began to churn. Questions nagged at him. What if they agreed, but with ulterior motives? What if the shadows of their business practices bled into this noble endeavor? Let's say we're interested, one of the others said, leaning forward with an air of premature concern. What's your role in this? What's up for you? Jake had anticipated this moment. My role is to connect the threads. I will coordinate the logistics, manage the outreach, and for every step we take together, I learn from you. This is a mentorship, exchange. I don't come to you empty-handed. For the first time, he wasn't just seeking information. He was offering value in return, anchoring his emerging identity within this fragile alliance. The nodding heads around the table were promising, yet Jake knew this was merely the beginning. As their conversation droned on into possibilities, Jake felt the boundaries of his aspirations stretching, his courage intertwining with their willingness. But the doubts loomed. What twisted allure lay behind the calm facade of this alliance? What had Jake just invited into his life? Unbeknownst to him, the real test had yet to come, and the stakes would rise higher than he could imagine. Would he find the strength to face not only his own journey, but the shadows of those he dared to partner with? As the evening wore on, his quest for Lucky stepped closer to fruition, but so too did the storm of challenges that loomed ahead. And in the back of his mind, the question reverberated louder than before. How much of himself was he willing to sacrifice for a chance at redemption? Jake was restless as he left the cafe, his mind still buzzing with the energy of the discussions. The possibility of collaboration thrummed in his veins, yet anxiety tempered his excitement. Each connection he had made felt like a double-edged sword, promising but precarious. Walking down the sun-baked sidewalk, he navigated through crowds, thoughts whirling with the new weight of responsibility. The atmosphere was alive with chatter and movement, but it felt distant, as if Jake were moving through a dream. Was he really prepared to take this leap? These people, while intrigued, were not purely altruistic. They carried the baggage of their own motivations. Every deal made was a negotiation with his own integrity, a complicated dance of trust that could spiral into exploitation. As he approached Lucky's temporary shelter in his small apartment, doubt crept in like a crawling vine, weaving through moments of clarity. Would these business owners remain true to their commitments, or would their interest wane like the evening light, leaving him alone again in his pursuits? He felt torn between the idea of his passion project and the deeper implications buried beneath the surface. Okay, Lucky, Jake murmured, kneeling beside the dog's bed where Lucky lay curled up, blissfully unaware of the controversies swirling around his rescue. It's all for you. The pup's gentle snuffling grounded him, a reminder of why he had initiated this fight for survival. But as the night deepened, another layer of ambition unfolded. How could he propel this venture without losing himself in it? Jake spent the next few days tethered to his laptop, sending emails, setting appointments, and drafting plans. Each keystroke pushed him a little closer to the envisioned collaboration, yet further ignited a familiar fear within. The fear of being a cog in someone else's machine. Would he be reshaping the narrative, or merely fitting into someone else's agenda? A viral post about Lucky's plight sparked interest, and potential partners began to emerge. The vibe of the community was shifting. People sought to engage with a cause, and social media notifications pinged like a fast-tracked heartbeat, each alarm another flicker of hope, but also a weighty expectation. Jake's enthusiasm battled with the inner voice warning him against overpromising and under-delivering. The impending gathering at the park loomed large, a mixture of anticipation and dread festering in his gut. Would he be able to muster the charisma to rally the support he desperately sought? Days before the gathering, Jake received a response from the local newspaper. They wanted to run a feature but had reservations about the legitimacy of the project. "Can you guarantee transparency?" the editor had asked perfectly. The stance felt both supportive and threatening. This was his moment of reckoning. Jake could feel the dichotomy of his ambition play out like a scene in his mind. Was he prepared to be transparent? Was this venture genuinely for Lucky, or was he still navigating the waters of his ego? He had aimed to be a mentor, but now it felt as if he needed a mentor himself, a guide to navigate the looming storm clouds of potential deception and personal sacrifice. He glanced over at Lucky, sighing. "I can't let you down," he promised softly. But with each passing moment, the stakes multiplied, and the horizon darkened. As he sat quietly, a sudden thought struck him like lightning. The gathering could be a turning point, but it could also devolve into chaos. If things spiraled, could he manage the fallout? And deep within him, a flicker of realization began to take hold. He was in control of this narrative, and he needed to lean into that power. In a world where profit often overshadowed compassion, Jake couldn't let fear dictate his role. He stood resolutely, determination surging anew. With the right approach and an unwavering commitment to his mission, maybe, just maybe, he could weave hope out of uncertainty. But before he could act, an unexpected phone call interrupted his thoughts, shattering the fragile calm he had cultivated. "Jake, we need to talk. This isn't just about the dog anymore." His pulse quickened. The conversation was starting to shift beyond what he had anticipated, and a sense of urgency filled the air. With every word, a new dilemma surfaced, and the reality of his commitment began to tighten around him. What had he truly invited into his life, and how would it reshape everything he hoped to achieve? The time had come to confront the reality behind the facade. What had begun as a simple puppy rescue was morphing into something far more complicated than he could have ever imagined. Jake's heart hammered as he held the phone, the voice on the line echoing in his mind like a persistent drumbeat. "What do you mean it's not just about the dog?" he pressed, sweat forming at his brow. The voice explained there were deeper layers, a complex web tangled up in local business interests, community ties, and uncertainties that stretched beyond Lucky's well-being. Each moment spent on the call twisted and coiled around his gut, undefined fears surfacing as images of a maelstrom swirled through his thoughts. "Look, you need to be prepared. People are watching," the voice warned. "If you want to succeed, you must approach this with a clear strategy. You can't just hope it all works out." The grim reality crystallized in his mind. The stakes were dramatically raised. What had seemed like mere outreach was now a potential public relations minefield. He hung up and sank into his chair, mind racing. One thing became painfully clear. He could no longer be an idealist chasing a dream. He had to become a strategist, a leader. Restructuring his approach drained him. He meticulously drafted a plan for the gathering, envisioning every detail from potential fundraising initiatives to community engagement strategies. Each element required a different aspect of himself, revealing parts he had long tucked away. His ability to negotiate, to influence, to inspire. Yet his sense of self-doubt clawed at him. Could he truly execute this vision without losing his integrity? As he continued to pen his thoughts, Jake noticed Lucky's head resting atop his paws, eyes fluttering as if he sensed the storm brewing in his master's mind. A surge of guilt coalesced around Jake. Would all this chaos distract from what really mattered, the safety and happiness of Lucky and other animals waiting for rescue? With newfound determination, Jake picked up his phone and sent out invitations to potential partners, ensuring a blend of enthusiasm and transparency in his messages. But somewhere in his subconscious, a question loomed thick in the air. Could he be both successful and ethical? Days passed, a barrage of phone calls and emails filling the space. The tension surrounding the gathering grew palpable, distorting his perception of the people connected to the venture. Each response they elicited from him pulled him deeper into a transformative fire, sparking the uncomfortable realization that he was now a spokesperson, the face of a movement. On the day of the gathering, Jake's nerves found a home in his stomach, swirling like a tempest. He arrived at the park early, the sun filtering through leaves, casting light upon the ground. There were familiar faces, those he had once reached out to in earnest, and those who had wandered into his life for unexpected reasons. As attendees began to trickle in, his emotions settled into a stark intensity. "Let's do this," he whispered to himself. His phone buzzed again. It was a reminder to stay centered and authentic. But still, he felt trapped by perceptions, worrying whether they saw the purpose at the core or merely the facade he was presenting. As he prepared to speak, the chatter around him sounded like a distant storm. When it was finally time, he stepped forward, breathing deeply, eyes scanning the crowd. A quietness enveloped him, breathing life into his mission. "Welcome, everyone. I'm grateful you're here. This isn't just about a dog, it's about creating a community built on trust and transparency." Jake felt the weight of every word, tinged with the urgency of his revelations. Each nod from the audience ignited a fire within him, a slowly emerging confidence. But just as he gained momentum, a clap arose from the gathering's shadowed corners, a familiar face coming forward. "Jake, you really think this can work? People want results, not ideals." The question flew through the air like an arrow, striking at his burgeoning belief. Who was this person, and how could they undermine the very foundation he was trying to build? His heartbeat quickened as thoughts raced. This was it. He was no longer just fighting for Lucky but against skepticism and the pressure to conform to others' expectations. While he had steps to take in defining his mission, the voice of doubt seemed to resonate deeper. Who was he really trying to please? As the gathering's atmosphere crackled with tension, Jake realized this was more than a simple inquiry. It was a test of his mission and his moral compass. The question hung in the air, charged with uncertainty, leaving him at a crossroads. The moment had come where he needed to confront both his vision and the barriers obstructing it, as he fought to navigate an unpredictable path ahead. What would he say next? How would this challenging confrontation shape the identity he was striving to develop? In that moment, the future blurred into a hazy uncertainty, pushing him to reconsider his commitment once more. Jake felt the tension in the air shift as he stood on the makeshift stage, grappling with the impromptu challenge. A flicker of doubt threatened to extinguish the small flame of confidence he had kindled moments before. He locked eyes with the interjector, a reminder of the skepticism that shadowed his endeavors. "I believe it can work," Jake shot back, determination pooling in his voice. "But it requires more than results. It requires integrity. We can't just focus on metrics. We must remember why we started this in the first place." The crowd murmured, and he saw interest reflected in some faces, though others mirrored the skepticism he dreaded. His heart raced, not from fear of failure but from the exhilarating recognition that he was at sea level, the moment where everything could rise or fall. The interjector shrugged nonchalantly, but Jake could sense the challenge remaining. "If you really believe that, then why are you hiding behind the crowd?" They fired back. The question landed heavily in his chest. Was he hiding? It gnawed at his self-awareness, forcing him to reckon with the uneasy truth. He had planned meticulously for this moment, hoping to present a polished front, but now he sensed a fissure in his authenticity. Taking a step forward, gauging the atmosphere around him, he shifted his tone. "It's not about hiding. It's about building something genuine. I'm not perfect, but my commitment to these animals is unwavering. Every paw saved means something, and I'm asking you to see beyond mere results to the heart of what we're doing." He watched as some attendees leaned forward, curiosity glimmering in their eyes. It emboldened him. He decided to share his raw motivations. "When I first found Lucky, my heart broke at the thought of what he had been through. But I soon realized it wasn't just about one dog or the pain. It's about how we can uplift all those who are voiceless. It's about our responsibility to make compassionate choices." The atmosphere shifted palpably. Skepticism began to dissipate, if only slightly. The movement of heads nodding, the faces warming, it fueled Jake's spirit. Yet pride also surged alongside doubt. Was sincerity enough? He took a deep breath. "But I need your help. I can't do this alone. It's a community effort, and that means debate, confrontation, and growth. Will you journey with me?" As his voice echoed off the park's trees, he felt vulnerability washing over him. This was a pivot from idealism to collaboration. He no longer sought to please everyone. He craved genuine partnership. A choice had emerged, committing to his values or crumbling under the weight of expectations. Just then, a voice from the back of the crowd called out, "But what about the funding? All this talk won't save the animals." The voice belonged to a local business owner, one he'd approached for support, but their expression offered a mix of concern and opportunity. Pain flared in Jake's chest. He had ignored the financial realities in favor of emotional appeals. However, the acknowledgement awakened something within him, a spark likely buried deep under the pressure to present a perfect image. What if he had to merge his heart with strategy? "Funding is essential," Jake admitted, drawing from his well of conviction. "My hope lies in building trust and transparency that will draw support. It's not one without the other. Help me forge this path, not just for Lucky but for every life that deserves saving." The crowd stirred, the palpable tension replaced with a mix of curiosity and cautious optimism. He could feel the tide shifting, and the vulnerability he embraced began forging connections. But just as he thought he had made progress, his phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He ignored it, focusing on the faces before him. Yet it buzzed again. The relentless urgency of the message beckoned, pulling at the corners of his mind like a fraying thread. Utilizing his moment of momentum, Jake closed his speech. "Let's harness our individual strengths and work together, combining our resources for a greater good. Let's honestly bridge the gap between ideals and actions." He stepped away, heart pounding, feeling a surge of accomplishment yet suffused with the realization that the journey before him was fraught with tension. He stilled as he retrieved his phone, glancing at it. It was a response that halted his breath, a message from an unexpected ally, hinting at looming complications he couldn't anticipate. Would this new information challenge everything he had just stood for? How deeply entangled were the workings behind the scenes, and was he ready to confront them? Jake felt the storm brewing anew as he stared at the screen, grappling with fear and curiosity. The next chapter of his story beckoned, filled with uncertainties waiting to unfold. Jake's heart raced as he stared at his phone, the words on the screen creating a knot of confusion in his stomach. The message was tantalizing yet foreboding, hinting at a potential collaborator who had insider knowledge about the very challenges that plagued his mission. The words seemed to pulse with an urgency that begged for exploration. He could either respond impulsively or take a step back and consider his next move. This felt like another divide, rushing in with raw emotion or proceeding with careful strategy. Squaring his shoulders, he settled on a middle ground. Reflecting on the vulnerability he had shown moments ago on stage, he realized this was yet another test, a new opportunity to tap into the authenticity he had just begun to uncover. "Think, Jake," he murmured to himself, scanning the crowd. People were still milling about, discussions sparking in clusters, a blend of measured words and passionate exclamations. Would they care about the complexities behind the scenes, or would they prefer straightforward solutions? He needed to tap into both realms if he were to maintain the delicate balance he had just begun to establish. He decided to check the message, tapping anxiously. The words were brief, offering a name, a local philanthropist known for funding animal-related causes but with a reputation for exacting control. "Meet me tomorrow at the Roost Cafe. There's more at stake than you think." The invitation to understand a deeper layer of the impending complications was alluring, but it was also fraught with risk. Did he want to entrust someone like this? Jake felt the weight of his inexperience in these delicate negotiations. Could he navigate an encounter with someone who might veer from his core mission into corporate interests? His principles were put into question. Rubbing the bridge of his nose, he contemplated his next steps, allowing his anxiety to simmer. Grounding himself in strategy rather than fear would be essential. If he was to redefine what rescue meant, aligning heart with head was imperative. He needed a plan, not only to pursue funding but to establish a relationship based on a shared vision rather than blind familiarity with the system. Jake spent the evening poring over data on potential funding sources, refining his vision, and solidifying his arguments. Peering into the depths of spreadsheets, he discovered unexpected avenues: government grants, private donors, even platforms for crowdfunding during natural spikes in emotional resonance. The raw drive he had once felt seemed to morph into concrete action points. As he crafted his proposal, an unexpected realization crystallized. He possessed a unique capability for blending storytelling with strategic thinking. This was his strength. Transforming passion into actionable outreach would differentiate him from others in the field. It was worth building a narrative that spoke to both hearts and wallets. The night wore on, but instead of fatigue, he felt an exhilarating surge of determination. Jake realized it was no longer just about saving dogs like Lucky. It was about philanthropy grounded in sincerity that could create lasting connections. When morning arrived, he felt fortified and ready. At the Roost Cafe, he would face his potential ally, but also safeguard his vision. He understood doubt and vulnerability were woven into the fabric of this encounter, yet he'd learned that it was only by confronting these feelings would he find clarity. As he stepped out into the morning light, Jake considered the crux of his challenge, reconciling the emotional core of his mission with the pragmatic necessities of securing support. The tension between authenticity and strategy loomed large, and it had the power to either deliver him the breakthrough he craved or serve as a bitter lesson in compromise. He fished out his phone again, the message looming in the back of his mind. What exactly lay in wait for him at the cafe, and how intensely would he have to negotiate his values when presenting his perspective? With every step, he felt the precarious balance of excitement and trepidation tighten. Would this meeting propel his mission forward or shake his foundation? The air was thick with possibility, and as he approached the cafe, Jake felt a fresh wave of resolve surge within him, taking a breath of confidence into the unknown. Jake entered the Roost Cafe, the familiar aroma of coffee enveloping him as he scanned the bustling room. The morning light poured through the large windows, illuminating the rich wood decor that seemed to hum with activity. He spotted the local philanthropist, a formidable figure perched at a corner table, her expression as sharp as her tailored suit. She waved him over, and Jake steeled himself for a conversation that could shift the entire trajectory of his mission. "Jake, I've heard some positive things about your efforts," she introduced coolly, her eyes examining him as if he were a project on her desk. "But I also hear you're swimming against strong currents." The words hovered between them, thick with implication. This wasn't just a casual chat, it was an interrogation masked in goodwill. Jake took a deep breath, determined to remain grounded amid the pressure. "I believe in the change we can create together," he replied, watching for her reaction. "It's not only about saving animals, but fostering a sense of responsibility among our community." Her lips curled faintly, as if amused by his idealism. "Responsibility is great, but can it pay the bills, Jake? If you're looking for genuine backing, you'll need to rattle some cages." His pulse quickened. This was the moment of truth. "I'm not here simply to ask for money. I want to build partnerships rooted in transparency and compassion. Perhaps we can host community events to draw attention to animal welfare while also elevating your brand." As confident as he sounded, doubt niggled at him. Would she respond to his vision, or see it merely as a means to bolster profits? "Charity is often a platform for self-preservation," she shot back. "But if you're looking for real support, you'll need a compelling story, a narrative that sells." Her words stung as though turning a spotlight on his vulnerabilities. Jake felt himself teetering, caught between ambition and the desire to stay true to his principles. "I'm not interested in creating a facade," he said, feeling conviction swell within him. "I'm here to focus on real lives that matter. The pets, the families waiting. They deserve authenticity, not empty gestures." A moment of silence passed, and he sensed her weighing the merit of his stance. The timbre of tension in the air began to shift. "Okay. Let's say I'm intrigued," she replied slowly. "What do you want?" "I want to develop a community program that engages local businesses, nonprofits, and volunteers. I'm currently planning an event that highlights the need for strays to receive medical care and support. We'll create compelling narratives around these animals, ones that resonate emotionally and ignite action," he explained, his confidence blossoming with each word. "With your backing, we can elevate this initiative to draw a wider audience while staying genuine." The spark of interest in her eyes flickered. "Intriguing." She leaned back, arms crossed as if examining the potential value of what he was proposing. "But giving you funding means taking a risk. There's no guarantee of a return." Jake nodded, fully aware of the stark realities that came with funding. But this isn't just about immediate results. It's about sowing seeds for the long term, building a sustainable approach toward animal welfare that prioritizes empathy. The flicker within her grew, hinting at something more concrete. I like your vision, but I need to see actual commitment, proof that your initiative will gather not just interest, but action. If you want to see commitment, I'll lead outreach efforts and gather volunteers immediately. I'll turn my messages into actions, Jake affirmed, feeling the tide start to turn. With your backing, we can engage the community together. This is about showcasing what collaboration can accomplish. They shared a look that spanned the division between mistrust and possibility. Fine, she said finally, her voice firm. I will grant you a modest budget for the event if you can produce results. But remember, I expect accountability and transparency every step of the way. The relief surged through him like fresh air filling his lungs. You have my word. As the conversation unfolded, Jake felt the strands connecting him to his vision knit tighter. He wanted to prove that authenticity and ambition could coexist, becoming a beacon for others facing similar battles, a chance to transform not just Lucky's future, but those of countless animals. In those moments, Jake understood he stood on the precipice of a wider transformation. He was not just advocating for animal welfare, he was setting the stage for authentic relationships built through collaboration, responsibility, and accountability. With a disposition stronger than he ever imagined possible, Jake left the cafe, invigorated and propelled by purpose. As the day unfolded, he would gather volunteers, nurture connections, and rally the community around Lucky's story. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was a changemaker, a defender of those without voices, and he felt indelibly linked to a mission greater than himself. As evening approached, he shared Lucky's updates and their collective efforts across social media. Each post reverberated with urgency and sincerity, unveiling euphoric responses from the local community, drawing support like a magnet. Jake felt the satisfaction of connection. People not only wanted to follow his journey but to become part of it. When he took a moment to look at Lucky, nestled safely at his side, he couldn't help but marvel at how much had shifted. He had transformed from an observer in his own life to an influencer crafting a narrative, one of resilience, empathy, and hope. The towering challenges had morphed into meaningful opportunities for growth, action, and community engagement. And in Lucky's trusting eyes, Jake found affirmation for the path he had chosen. He was on the brink of achieving not just a personal breakthrough, but a collective awakening. He now stood firmly at the intersection of hope and action. And as he looked ahead, he could sense the essence of true impact brewing beneath the surface, a powerful reminder that the journey to transformation was not just about winning battles, but becoming a resounding voice of change. Today was a milestone, but tomorrow held the promise of even greater triumphs, an assurance of purpose driven by compassionate engagement. The journey ahead was sure to be uncertain, a tapestry of trials and victories, but he was ready, emboldened to carve out a legacy grounded in love not only for animals like Lucky, but for all those seeking their moment of rescue. This was the dawn of Jake's new era, a celebrated chapter where he'd conquered doubt and embraced the entire spectrum of his identity. He would build bridges out of their shared hopes, stepping boldly into the future and exemplifying what it meant to face challenges head-on with a heart full of compassion and integrity. Now to you, the readers, the followers, and the believers. You need to subscribe now to witness the unfolding of these extraordinary emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Share your reactions and theories about this ending in the comments. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Join the movement for personal growth and transformation.